The agenda. Can I see your agenda? Got mine. Thank you. Is the approval of the minutes from June 11th, 2013.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Public comment. I'd like to open the floor now for public comment. And seeing none, public comment is closed. New business. The updated electric utility rate sufficiency study. Cindy?
Drop all these numbers. I think I sent this out last week. What we had talked about the last time we looked at the utility rate sufficiency is that we would go ahead and monitor it, update it to include the May and June numbers, and have another look at where we stood. I sent that out to you guys last week. Essentially, we've got two things: updated May and June. Sales are up closer to our original forecast, and the margin between our billed revenue and our purchase power cost has improved considerably. We also have had yet another look at our capital program and reduced the amount of money we plan to spend in the current year and in next year on the capital, and that's something we discussed with council at our budget workshops. So, bottom line, based on the analysis that we have before us, we're recommending that we don't change the electric utility rates at this time. We want to continue to monitor them through the last quarter of 12-13 and revisit it once we receive the complete 13-14 purchase power cost forecasts as we go into next year's budget adoption. And that should be sometime in late August and certainly in time for the council to adopt a 13-14 budget and adopt rates for that budget that are sufficient for next year's costs. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or maybe Jim can help, but that's all we're recommending.
Okay, well, I think that's really good news. I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you for staying on top of this and keeping up, and thank you for bringing us good news. But does anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Okay. Next, under old business, is an update on the FNPA and the negotiations. Jim?
Yes, sir. We have not had a meeting in July due to conflicts with FMPA and their lead on this, who is Fred Bryant. But our attorneys are still working on the tax issues. I know of at least 3 meetings that have been between OUC and FP&L. And right now, that's the big nut that we're trying to get across and trying to address the concerns that FMPA has on those. And that really, we're sort of a third party, not really a part of that contract, but that'll be in the sales agreement between FP&L and OUC.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Turner, did you have anything to add from your meeting Friday?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Stradley. And if I can pass these out. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. As a council member, I usually watch y'all. I don't try to be here as I may be accused of influencing you in any way, but I do really appreciate your service, and we do take your guidance and your comments seriously. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I had Friday, July the 19th, I attended the FMPA's board meeting and the ARP's executive committee meeting. This was part of their annual conference that they had held at Sanibel Island. I will, for the record, say I did not attend the conference. I was not out on Sanibel Island. I drove in Friday morning early to Fort Myers, attended my meetings, and returned. The board meeting agenda called for approval of their 2014 budget. I've distributed some highlights of that budget for you, and I'd like you to look at noting the megawatt cost per hour of these projects exceed FPL's retail rate of $93.25 per megawatt hour. Most notably, the Stanton project is projected to be $174 per megawatt hour. which is our largest share of the FMPA's entitlements. We have 20 megawatts from there. Stanton 2 is at 92.26, and St. Lucie is, to be fair, slightly below FPL's retail rate at 89. What I want you to see here, too, is our Vero Beach, our high electric costs, our power costs, are not a result of our OUC contract. They're from FMPA. So contrary to some of the theories saying, oh, well, we can lower our power costs by getting out of OUC, sorry, guys, it's not that easy. It's back at FMPA, where we're tied until 2066 with these projects. Would also like to call your attention to note that FMPA's budget has increased by 12.5%. And in these budget days, I don't know any place that's increasing by 12.5% and being approved by the board. Only Vero Beach and then reluctantly Gainesville voted against the adoption of this budget. Who's looking out for your municipal customers? It's certainly not the board members of FMPA. At the conclusion of the board meeting, I spoke during the member comments, and I wanted to explain to the members of the board the situation we have in Vero Beach. You know, we have 33,000 customers that no longer wish to be customers of the city of Vero Beach Electric. That Vero Beach Electric cannot compete with FPL, which surrounds our community. And their rates are, at the time I said 30, I did a look at it this morning, they're 37% below us. Reviewing FMPA's budget, their forecasted power costs are higher than FPL's retail rates. Where's the room for transmission, the power plant, maintenance, customer service, much less any return to the city? Our customers pay more than $20 million in premium electric costs. I also mentioned I was disappointed that FMPA's staff could not meet with us at any day in the month of July. And I went on to say that we have submitted a comprehensive plan which will meet the objectives of protecting the bondholders of FMPA, preserving the tax-exempt status of those bonds at no cost to the members. That it's a fair and reasonable plan for all members. The response from those comments was that the proposal had only been received on Monday. Fred Bryant, their chief counsel, said he's still pressing for an IRS private letter ruling, and that we must meet the terms of the contract. The contract is a pledge of honor to the bondholders. However, the representative from Winter Park spoke up and said, although FMPA's budget items repeat the goal that FMPA being the lowest cost producer, they have failed miserably. FMPA is the highest cost producer, and their project costs are more than 50% higher than the norm. The representative from Bushnell, who's the outgoing chairman of the boards, told the members that they need to vote for the good of the whole. However you want to interpret that. Moved on to the ARP Executive Committee meeting. I attend this meeting as a member. I am a non-voting member. During member comments, I presented Vero's request for our 3-year waiver. That this plan proposes a waiver with no possible harm or disadvantage to any member for early termination. Vero is not requesting a waiver of any financial obligations. There is no cost to ARP members, but for each month of delay to our own customers, it's over $2 million. I asked FMPA to step up to consider this waiver, not only for the good of their member, but also for their customers. Once again, the whole idea of the electrical customers is lost to FMPA. The response to those comments were Fred Bryant reiterated once again that we must satisfy the rating agencies and the trustees. Now, sure, that's certainly our goal to do such. The new chairman of the FMPA board stated that if there was no risk to the city, that he would support a waiver, which I thought was good news. And so at least I'm starting to see some vocal support within the FMPA, continue to bring our cause before them, and hope for the best. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I do, Ms. Turner. I passed out this morning, and I gave to staff to have it put online and into the public record, an email that Bill Thies sent he's at the time he was the director of utilities at Fort Pierce Utilities, and he sent this email about a phone call he received from Fred Bryant and the assistant general manager Mark McCain at the FNPA. And in this email, it misrepresents the city of Vero Beach's position. Mr. Thies came away from that phone call with a misunderstanding of our position. It's very clear, because he thinks that we're trying to get out of our liabilities. We have never made any statement that we don't want to pay what we legally owe. And I'm not sure whether Mr. Bryant and Mr. McCain misrepresented us or Mr. Thies misunderstood. But if the FNPA wants to cooperate with us, I think it's incumbent on them and the general manager to go to his employees and have them go back to each and every city that they reached out to and make sure they understand the city of Vero Beach's position, that we intend to meet our legal liabilities under these contracts. And I'd like to ask you to do this as our representative.
So I need to make a request to the general manager to clarify this.
That he have his employees.
Certainly.
That's what Fred is, and his assistant, the assistant general manager. It's very disconcerting to me that this information would be out. And again, I don't really want to read the whole email. It'll be up online, and so if the public wants to read it. There is some question, and I talked to our transitional attorney, and the timing of this is somewhat, this was before our final proposal.
Yes.
Which made it explicitly clear to FNPA. But there was nothing ever in our position from the very start of this that said we would not meet our obligations. So whether it was a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation, it's something that went to these cities whose cooperation we need, and that misunderstanding needs to be addressed.
Great. I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you very much.
Plar?
Ms. Turner, we're not done here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
you?
I'm done, but go ahead.
Plar, I was going to applaud you on that approach. I think potentially this email is indicative about potentially how much more effective one-on-one conversations can be. Because if you address the whole body and somebody else is meeting with them individually, giving them other information, then so I was just curious, had you thought about contacting them individually versus addressing them as a body, and is that allowed, or do the sunshine rules apply, and so you can't do that? You have to have the press available.
I will check with attorneys as far as any sunshine violation, Mr. Hill. I do speak individually with the members, prior to the board meeting itself on those occasions. I haven't reached out to them outside of that venue. And if there is no problem with sunshine, I will be glad to continue doing so.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Okay. Next on our agenda is a discussion of the septic to sewer conversions incentives. Rob?
Good morning, Commissioners. I guess I could hand out. We did do a poll since our last meeting. One of the outcomes was to poll the area in the Shore Drive area, and I do have the responses, and I can hand those out. If you look, the red, I guess, if you want, I can put it up on the.
We can
that way
put that
the
on, but you'll
public
need to
can
turn it
see.
on.
As you can see, the outcome was not in favor of sewering Shore Drive. I had a meeting with the residents on, I'm thinking the 24th or something like that of July. It was 2 weeks prior to the deadline, towards the end of June, I mean. And 6 of the individuals that live along Shore Drive attended. Mr. Thomas was one of them. He spoke in favor. And the other 5 were there to gather information and also to discuss the sewering and really what I took out of the meeting. I learned a lot. That one of the things that I found was that unlike a lot of the areas of the mainland, the people on the barrier island seem to know exactly, especially on these smaller lots with waterfront properties and everything else, they really knew a lot about their septic system, where it was. It appeared to me that some of them have had problems with their septic tanks, and quite a few of them have taken the efforts to relocate them towards the front of their property and have replaced drain fields, probably within the last 10 years. At the meeting, I gave them presented a drawing that showed the 75-foot setback from the water's edge and also the city's rights-of-way lines and where their septic tanks would, if there was changes to the law, where they would have to be installed if there was some problems with their septic tank over time. It didn't seem to upset the people in that area. They felt that a lot of them had moved their drain fields to those areas. Some of them had left their septic tanks still in the rears of the property, and I hadn't had a chance to go back to the county to discuss with the health department there if that was allowed to leave the septic tank there but move the drain field. But a lot of them weren't willing to take on the task of a $20,000 investment to install sewer at this time. And a lot of them felt that on top of a $20,000 investment, they then had an ongoing monthly cost of sewer. So the outcome of that meeting was 5 of them were against it, 1 was for it. Prior to going into the meeting, we had 4 people that had returned against it, 1 and for it, and then as a result, we've tallied here. The in red is a no, green was a yes, and yellow we did not get a response back from those individuals. We tried to contact them by phone, but left a message, but still did not get a response. So as you can see, there was 18 people that the letters were sent out to. 13 of them said no, 3 said yes, and 2 were undecided, which would be counted as a no.
Okay.
So,
and 719, is that the property that partnered with us, or we partnered with in putting a lift station in?
exactly.
So 719 is currently
On sewer.
on sewer.
So they were not part of the process.
Okay. And so the sewer line runs, we have a line at Tradewinds. Is that correct?
Well, we have a force main, not a gravity
Force-
sewer line. So we have a
force
lift
main.
station on at 719, and then there's a force main that runs up the street and down to tie into some other force main networks that come back to the plant here.
Okay. But so the cost, the $20,000 cost was because we would have to put a gravity?
Gravity sewer, which was manholes and gravity lines to all the properties and laterals out to each property line.
And that would be up Shoreland Drive here.
Right.
Okay.
So by the time, but the 20,000 was let's say $15,000 to $20,000. It was roughly $13,000 for the construction activities that would take place in the street, and then there was an additional $3,000 to $4,000 for the people to abandon their septic tanks, run lines from their backyards to their front yards, make the connections, replace any landscaping that might need to be replaced, and to make the connections themselves.
And then on top of that, there was an impact fee.
And there was an impact fee involved in it. The impact fee was part of that original $13,000.
Okay. And you did mention to them that there were other options that were less expensive. And
we had a discussion on since the last meeting. I've been talking with a company called Arenco, and there are some other options which caught their attention. I mean, they were really interested in something that was more cost effective, but at the end of the day, you know, you're going now down to a cost of $8,000 to $10,000 versus $20,000, but they could still replace their drain field for $4,000 to $5,000.
Okay.
And they don't have a monthly bill.
Well, that's a decision that they have to make, and I won't second guess them. I think, though, that the main cost is the work that we have to do. Now, are there some septic tanks on the island and in the city that have already got the lines on their street?
Yeah, there's some gravity. And I ran the numbers on there. There's only 10. So there's 10 homes that have a gravity sewer system in front of their house that are still on septic. It's not a considerable amount of people. There's been numbers that people have thrown out, a whole lot of hundreds, and it's not hundreds. There's, like I said, there's 10 of them within our service territory. That's the entire service territory. That's not just city
just the
limits.
City. Okay.
Yeah, so that's not a lot of people.
Yeah. And for those people, the cost would be their plumber plus the impact fee.
Yes.
Okay. The plumber landscaping.
Plumber landscaping, which abandoned septic might run you $2,000 or $3,000. Maybe more if they have 2 septic tanks that they have to run each lateral line out to the street, and then the one-time impact fee.
Well, I know in our last discussion we talked about how we have sufficient capacity, and so
Yes.
we don't need to be charging the impact fee for the new capacity. And even though it's only 10, I was really impressed by the presentation that was given at the last city council meeting by Dr. Lapointe, where he had one particular slide that showed, I think, conclusively that the nutrient pollution here at this part of the Indian River, off Vero Beach, is from affluent and human waste. I don't remember whether it was, if the number was below 3 or 0.3, that it was from fertilizer, and if it was over that, then it was from human effluent. And I think, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's 3, and then if it's over that, it's human.
Yeah, he made the statement that any fertilizer impacts for nitrogen, and they call it N15, was the test that he was doing. If it was below 3, it was from fertilizer itself. Anything above 3, his statement was, had to be coming from septic tanks.
And wasn't the number 7-ish? 7
in
or
a
9?
6 number, 6.2, or
Okay.
between 6 and 7, I believe.
So significantly above the 3.
Yes.
Okay. I really like to see the city do whatever the city can. I'd like to see the city pursue grants. I'd like to mitigate this problem as much as possible. And even though, and I would like to suggest and that we get that we make a motion here to the city council to recommend that they waive the impact fees for a year. If we do that, we can maybe at least make it very economical or more economical for those 10 to move. And there may be some others other septic tanks, other property owners that will that'll make the difference for. And if we do it for a limited period of time, if we only do it for a year, and we structure it so that they have to have the septic tank installed within the year, it won't affect new growth. Not that there's much left to build out in our service area, but it won't affect that because I don't think we have a significant number of projects right now on the horizon. It would affect those septic tanks that are already there, that are already leaching into the groundwater, the effluent that ultimately gets to the river, which affects our seagrasses. And so, and again, with the caveat that we have the capacity to add all of these now. We don't have to collect an impact fee to increase our capacity. So with those caveats, I'd like to make a motion that we make this recommendation to the city council, that we waive the impact fees for septic tank hookups in our service area for a year.
You could do a year, you could do 6 months. I mean, for those 10, we can send a letter out to them and say, what I've noticed in a lot of these response things is you give somebody a year, they put it off. And they don't necessarily make a decision right away. Oh, I'll readdress that, and then they forget about it. So if you give them a window maybe of 6 months, then they may commit earlier to it, and you may have a better shot at getting them to connect. Than a year.
If I can get a second to the motion, then in the discussion we can maybe talk about the time frame.
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay. Any discussion?
I guess one of my thoughts in this is I appreciate where the chair is coming from. It seems that we need a more comprehensive plan, though. 10 units isn't going to really resolve the issue that's facing the lagoon. And I guess the efforts of doing something on a bigger picture, I would like to see on the forefront of where we're going with this. The other question, in the future, I guess when we had our last meeting, I was under the impression from the presentation from Mr. Thomas that the neighbors in this area had already all basically agreed to move forward with this project. I would have to imagine there was a substantial amount of staff time spent on this. Is there a policy in place that, like 50% of the people already resolved to move forward before staff time is spent? Or
normally when we hand out the information to somebody, we get a lot of these in that come in, and it used to be a lot for water more than sewer. And we request that the person that's wanting the assessment go through and get signatures from at least 50% of the neighbors before staff takes action on anything. In this case, he came to the commission meeting here, and it appeared that there was, from what he was saying, that there was intent to look at sewering it, and also we had the entire discussion on the lagoon going on. So I felt, if anything, it was a good survey to see where people stood on septic tank conversion to sewer. I didn't bring it up, and maybe that was my fault that I didn't say, well, normally we have 50% signature, but in any case, yes, there is staff time that's involved in it. That's a policy that we have that we can start reinforcing again. But either way, this was a good survey to see where the people actually stand on and what their concerns were, and it was a good meeting for me to go to understand, to know what I'm up against when we're discussing some type of septic tank conversion system of where to meet people in the middle. And right now, $20,000 is way out of the league. So somehow we have to, like you said, we have to come up with a plan. And I can see that the next comment by people is going to be, well, that's fine. I'm doing that here in Vero, but what about Sebastian? What about Fort Pierce? What about Martin County? What about Brevard County? All part of the same lagoon. And I don't know if I know after the meeting, Mr. LaPointe had a discussion with Ms. Mayfield about trying to get something that addressed the entire lagoon with septic tanks. So maybe that's where the focus needs to be, and trying to get this, a better understanding, a long-term plan to address it. The state has done stuff down in the Keys years ago, and they've addressed the septic tank issue that was affecting the coral reefs down there. Here you have a very similar thing, is you have a national estuary that's, and I believe I've read some stuff that there is some discussions again through the National Estuary Program, which is part of the lagoon, trying to find better ways to maybe get some grant funding for it. As the economy may pick up, you may have some state monies available, but right now the state budgets are tight, and they don't have tons of extra money like they did after during the housing boom and after the hurricanes, where you have that state tax revenues coming back in to the local economies. You don't have that right now.
Rob, could I ask, what would the actual dollar amount be of the impact fee that we're discussing?
The impact fee is $2,290.
Okay. In regards to your motion, I have to. The concept that we would ask these people to pay for the impact to the system. In other words, run the line to run the gravity sewer and then charge them an impact fee, I find not in keeping with the concept of impact fees. If you're going to ask them to pay for their impact, then how do you charge them an impact fee on top of it? To me, I would prefer what I would consider a more principled approach to this, rather than saying we're going to waive impact fees for 6 months. I think our position should be, if you pay for your impact, then there is no impact fee charged. That, to me, because that's what impact fees are supposed to do. Now, it appears obvious if the impact fee is $2,200, then, and this work actually costs $13,000, then the impact fee is low. That being what it is, we'll discuss that another day. But I am not in favor of asking them to pay for the cost and charging them an impact fee on top of it. If you ask them to pay for the cost, I would waive the impact fee because they're addressing their impact. You've already stated in past that there's no need to expand the plant for this.
And the impact fee covers the plant.
But you stated
the other line is the cost within their subdivision.
I understand that, but you stated previously there's no need to expand the plant, so help me with that.
When you have an impact fee, impact fees do two things. One, they allow for future growth of a plant, and two, when you meet that future growth, the last time you do your final construction at a plant, to where if you have a service area and you have enough capacity now for that service area, then the proceeds that you bring in from impact fees pay down the debt that you've taken on during the whole process of expanding your plant. We're at that point. We have enough capacity at the plant. Any of the impact fees that are collected now pay down the debt that we've incurred over time to expand that plant. The cost that we're talking about is internal to these subdivisions. Under our current subdivision ordinance, and just like Mr. Meckling will probably tell you, anytime that he develops a subdivision, the developer would install all these lines, the internal lines for gravity sewer and a lift station and a force main out to the property line. At that point, if it's tying in along State Road 60, that force main down State Road 60, that's paid for by impact fees. If you had a master pump station, that would be paid for by impact fees, and then to the final plant, the plant and all the disposal of it is paid for by the impact fees. This subdivision is so old that they were not required at the time it was platted. There wasn't any sewer close to it, so they were not required to connect to the central sewer system of Vero Beach, and therefore they were allowed to build it on septic. You couldn't plat this subdivision today and install it on a septic system. So to retrofit these older areas, the costs associated internal to the subdivision, because as they install the sewer lines, now their property values become greater. It has always been a policy that the city will not take money out of the utility to pay for the infrastructure for putting in the sewer lines. So there are two distinct things that we're discussing. One is the impact fee that had to do with the force mains and has to do with the plant capacity, and then is the internal lines and everything else. Historically, we've charged the impact fees. What I've made the statement is we have the force mains in place, we have the utility lines in place, and we've never considered anybody on septic as a future customer. So when we look at our growth or expansion or anything that we're doing and collecting the impact fees, the septic tanks have never been considered as part of that equation. That is the only reason that I said there may be an opportunity or an incentive or something to try to look at waiving those impact fees.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Then, so we still have bonds we're paying to pay off the treatment plant.
Yes.
And so these would go to offset those costs.
Yes.
But we don't have to run a new force main outside of the neighborhood. It's going to be gravity. What are you going to do? You're going to put a lift station at the end and then pump to tie into the force main?
Yeah, the gentleman at 719 that was not part of it, he installed a lift station that we participated in some of the costs to. So the gravity lines would run to the lift station that's in front of his house, and that was this project itself. Now, similar if you were to go in and do lines along Live Oak or some of those other streets, Indian River Drive, that are abutting the water, it would be the same type of approach.
Right. Okay. All right. So that being said, so then you feel that the 2,200 is justified, and
my statement was, if you're going to get into a sewering program and people were going to be involved, and you were trying to convert most, or at least the individuals, there's roughly 175 waterfront lots.
Okay, wait, don't look at it as an incentive. I get that part,
right.
that you felt the financial pushback. I'm saying if we treat everybody fairly, and everybody should pay their fair share of the plant, and then you feel that 2,200 is fair. We'll discuss whether or not there needs to be an incentive.
The 22 is fair. Yes.
Okay. Now, can I go to the meeting that you had with the folks, the 6 that showed up, one of which was Nick Thomas, if I understand that correctly. And who ran the meeting? I want to get a feel for the meeting. I ran the meeting. Okay, and so Nick spoke.
Nick spoke of, he was the first one to speak and more or less informed the individuals kind of why they were there and how because one of the individuals asked, how did we get here? And so Nick said that he was the one that came before the commission and asked to look at sewering the area.
And he made the pitch for doing this lagoon?
He more or less made it because, he lived in an area, he wanted to continue to living in there, and that he was going to be doing some modifications to his home, and felt that now would be the time that he
switched to sewer.
And then he also made comment that it would help the lagoon. The reason behind his interest in the sewer, I don't think, was helping the lagoon as much as it was with full utilization of his property.
And your discussion was the financial end?
My discussion to the residents was the discussions that City Council had, and we're still investigating the necessarily maybe the enforcement of the new regulations of septic tanks, how it would affect the property owners themselves with 75-foot setbacks and rights of way and where their septic drain fields would have to be installed, and then to present to them what the cost of sewer was. I was not trying to sell them connecting to sewer, by no means. I was there only presenting the financial facts and the the setback facts and what their options were.
And from there was questions and answers, and then
There was questions and answers, no vote. Some people got up and voted on they were each given a form. Some filled it out right there and handed it to us. Some others went back and talked with neighbors that were out of town on vacation and then sent them in to us. But you could feel in the room that it was 5, and as a result, it was 5 that said no and 1 that said yes.
would you say the conversation revolved more finances than the lagoon?
Yes.
Okay. I would submit to you, Mr. Chairman, that we need to, so to speak, rethink our approach. It's obvious from a financial standpoint, nobody's going to be motivated to make this change.
No.
And the only way you're going to motivate people, in my opinion, is it has to be about the lagoon. It has to be about the health of the lagoon, which has to translate back to the health of all of us. And even further, that eventually, if they do not do this voluntarily, eventually this lagoon will continue to deteriorate to the point that it'll either be the state or the federal DEP will step in, and then it will be forced upon the citizens. Okay? So at some point, you've got to get them to look beyond this financial numbers or transaction. I think the presentation is key. That's why I think we need to take a different approach, an overall approach, if we hope to win this discussion and encourage people to do the right thing voluntarily versus through coercion from some form of government.
Well, Toby, I agree with you in everything that you've said. Additionally, I agree with you that I would prefer the impact fees just go away completely. I've been very clear in the public on the Economic Development Council and before the County Commission that I think we need to look at all of our impact fees and manage them better so that our economy can grow. And in this particular issue, I also agree, and I do not like when government mandates people to do things. I think that's a restriction of their liberty. I think that the motion that I've made today isn't directed at those 10 homes that have a minimal cost. It will cut their cost in half. The motion today my motion covers the whole city, and it's an incentive. It's not money that we need to expand our plant capacity. So it's an incentive to encourage people to voluntarily make this transition. I don't think it would have affected the Shore Drive neighborhood. And with respect to, Rob, your survey, and I think that Mr. Thomas was very enthusiastic, and we all of us here came away with the impression that he had done a lot of this work in advance. I think it's unfortunate that his approach seemed to be, gee, this would be really nice for my piece of property, and I hope you guys spend $20,000 too, instead of the crisis that we're facing on the river. I know it's not much, and I know that it's not enough, and I don't think that we should stop here, but I think it's a first step. And at the risk of being cliche, every journey starts with the first step. And it's something that we can do. We can do as an incentive that doesn't impact the city's finances, doesn't impact water sewer capacity. And I think it's a good first step. I don't think this is the end. I would never want that impression to be made. There's a lot that we need to do. But it is something that's non-coercive. And ultimately, I think you're right, Toby, that in the end, if these things are not addressed voluntarily, they'll be addressed legally. And I don't want to go. I want to do everything I can to preserve people's choice and liberty. And so I think this is something that we can do, the city can do now, that's voluntary. And we can help those. Everybody that does this would be helped. Some would be half the price, some would be lesser percentage. So that's my thinking in bringing forth this motion.
Okay, well, I want to make a clarification. based on Rob's explanation, I am more in line with your approach than my opening statement. I do see it as something that we can do as an incentive, but I would prefer, like I said at the last meeting, there needs to be a lot of thought to this. And if we just now say 6 months, I think you have to have an educational period where you get the public to understand what's going on. There's been a lot of stuff written, but I really think there needs to be a more organized effort to get the information out, and then you offer the 6-month waiver. If you offer it now, I think there's a lot of time that has to be spent in educating the public, and then give them that period to take advantage of it. I think I stated before is I like to be fair and reasonable and principled, but okay, look, I live in a community that's got a sewer in it, and I paid my impact fees. So am I just going to stand on principle and say, no, I don't want them waivered, I paid? If it helps clean the river up, okay, I'll say, let's give them the waiver. I'm okay, I paid, but I think that needs to be a discussion, and that we all understand that we're better for it. I think the city council has to address it. The public has to be given the opportunity in advance to come out and speak, and that we all embrace this because it's for the lagoon, which is good for every county resident. And once you have that and you get that, then offer the waiver. I think offering it now is a little premature. So I'm not as opposed as my first statement.
Okay, well,
Can I get
first of all, the motion is a year, and I would be very willing to have it amended to permanently eliminate it, or 2 years, so that we have time to do this education. I just think that it's something that we need to start, and it's something that then if we make this motion, I will take it to city council, and that will start the discussion there, and then that will start the public input and start this process.
Can I get a point of clarity? When the motion started, was my understanding it was for the 10 lots that had the ability to gravity feed into an existing line that's out in front of their property. That was the impression I had when the motion was made. Am I incorrect?
I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. No, it would be city-wide or service area-wide.
Okay,
I can read back the motion if you want.
Could you please?
The motion was to make a recommendation to the city council that they waive the impact fee for septic tank hookup for 1 year.
Okay. And I appreciate all the conversation. I'd be opposed to that simply because I think we need a plan first, because I don't even understand where the force mains would have to be, where the gravity feeds would have to be, and we need to have some cohesive plan to bring to the public along with the educational process to even understand the cost of this. And I guess when the plant was originally designed, it was designed to handle X number of units. As what I heard earlier was that the septic tanks or the residents that are on septic was not part of that initial equation. Now, I don't know if all the septic tanks, if there was a plan that there's still sufficient capacity or not, but I guess that would be a major question if it wasn't in the original vision, numbers-wise, at the facility.
I'll look at all of the septic tanks within our complete service territory. A lot of times when we first started this discussion, because we have no enforcement outside the city limits as far as changing any regulations on septic tanks, the original discussions were on the city limits themselves, and we had the capacity for city limits. Now, if we're taking into the equation our entire service territory, I'll need to rerun those numbers, make sure we have adequate capacity on that.
Okay. Well, I think that my understanding was that we do have the capacity, we did have the capacity. And I agree, we need the educational program. Chuck, with respect to where the force mains are, it's not relevant. They're going to be where they are going to be placed where they need to be placed. If we go back to Shorelands, again, they've rejected this program. I understand it. But wherever those force mains go and whatever needs to be done. And those people would pay for those costs. This doesn't have anything to do with that. So this has to do with the fact that it was $20,000, and now it's going to be $17,500. Would you be interested at $17,500 for them? Probably this neighborhood not, but maybe somebody else. The answer would be yes. Some other neighborhoods, yes. With respect to the 10 lots, it goes from $5,000 to $2,500 in rough figures. That might be. They might still say no. That's okay. This is a thing that's free. It's a voluntary incentive. If you want to do it, it would be good for the lagoon. It would be good for the city. It would be good for your neighbors, and I don't see any downside to it.
It would only be good if they all hook up.
One hooks up, it's good.
Yeah, and I don't know where the 10 exist. If you would like, I can come back at the next commission.
I don't think it's Rob. I don't think it's relevant where the 10 exist. There are 10 that have a very minor cost, relatively minor cost compared to Shoreland. This isn't about them. This is about the river. This is about not doing something wild and crazy, but taking a first step and saying, we don't need this $2,500 for impact, so let's stop charging it. Maybe that'll make the difference for somebody in their decision.
But we don't know that right now. That's why I'm just saying I feel we need more information to understand the impact on the plant facility, how many of those potential hookups would there be. And, from doing development work, you always have a plan. It's like building a house. If you don't have a base foundation, a roadmap to go from, you're a bit lost. And again, it goes back to trying to understand what the entire impact would be as far as a system to be able to actually take the time to go through the process to even say, with the waiver of the impact fee, are we really going to go anywhere? Because then it almost necessitates another step in the process, and that step would be, are we going to put some force mains in or gravity lines? Or I don't understand enough to say if it would be an impact on the city, good or bad. And I totally agree with the idea of the educational process in regards to the lagoon, but I think we need to have a foundation plan on this.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As a water wastewater operator and involved in the environmental industry in that area, I think you definitely need to consider the educational upfront first, because a lot of people are not convinced at this point that the total problem is the septic tanks in the area. There are other impacts that are happening above, around, ahead of us that are coming down to us, and I think what we need to do is do a great deal of education to people so that then they will get the idea that, oh yeah, maybe I can make a difference if I spend this money. Right at the moment, I don't think that concept is, from what I'm hearing, is totally county-wide or even Florida-wise. I think there are a lot of people that just don't understand the dynamics, and they think, well, what good is it going to be for those 19 or 20 homes to hook up if nobody else in the area gets the option? And we have to go out and educate people. If you're going to give this the sunshine for a year to hooking up on your service area wide, then these people need to be educated too, not just that little group there. You need to get out and get everybody educated so that you get your bang for your buck and get them on.
Well,
so,
again,
I think
I agree that this is not the totality of the problem, and this isn't.
Well, Scott, I would also ask you to keep in mind, and many times you have one shot at doing these things, and if you pass this now and it doesn't work, to bring it back later is going to be much more difficult. And so I think it's premature.
Okay. I appreciate Mr. Hill.
I have a comment. Just in listening to this, the one part of this whole discussion which concerns me is that whether it's a year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, it's precedent setting.
Yes.
And we're not prepared, I don't think, to be setting precedents right now.
I agree with that. I think we need to be fair to everyone. So I think, as Chuck said, we need the information on the whole system and what the impact will be if everybody gets it. I agree with the incentive. I agree with the chair that we want to incentivize people to do this. But I think we need to have the whole impact and everybody be treated the fair way and not just do a piecemeal approach, and also the education and the impact. And I think everybody right now wants to do something. But, maybe at the end, like Jane said, it will be determined that that is not really the serious issue. So we need a lot more information.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll bring back a map that shows all the septic tanks. And Mr. LaPointe, like he said, he had a very impressive, and if you have a chance to watch it on one of the plays of the city council.
I was here.
He is indicating that it's coming, but you're still going to run into the argument with the individuals, and I get the arguments, not necessarily you, is how do I know it's coming from my property? How do I know it's not just the property that's sitting right next to the lagoon? And so last week I contacted somebody I've known for years at the St. Johns River Water Management District in charge of the Indian River Lagoon program, and I asked him if there was any studies ever done on the groundwater on the barrier island to see how fast the groundwater moves, because you have the tidal conditions of the ocean pushing the water across the barrier island underneath where you're standing to the lagoon as the tide, and then conversely goes back the other way. And he said no, and we talked about grants, and he asked me to send him some write-ups that would be a thesis, and he would kind of toss it out around St. John's, see if there's any grant funding available that we could possibly put in monitoring wells, say in city right-of-ways on the barrier island, and that would be representative of the whole entire lagoon, unless there's drastic soil changes, which I doubt. It was beach sand that was pushed up that formed barrier islands, and that would be a helpful study for the St. John's, and it might go a long way that as you have Mr. LaPointe doing other research and his group there at Harbor Branch, that you could understand if you're in the center and the top of the hill and your septic tank is operating, how long that travel time distance might be to the lagoon water body itself, and then how much is actually taken out. Septic tanks, they only remove about 28% of the nitrogen that you're loading into the septic tank. So they do work in some capacity, but just a typical wastewater plant, you're going to get 50% removal, and then in a biological nutrient removal type wastewater plant, you're going to get 90% removal. So, and if nitrogen is driving the problems in the lagoon, then I think you're at the beginning of, like you said, your educational program, but there's a lot of other things that needs to go into the discussions of septic tanks.
Mr. Chairman, I did not want to go on record that I was not, saying that these septic tanks were not affecting the lagoon. What I was trying to say was that the majority of people are not convinced of that yet. And not meaning, I'm only saying that was my point. I didn't want it to come out that I was contesting the gentleman that gave his profession.
Thank you. And what I'm going to then recommend is that we, maybe Danielle, you'll make a motion to table this motion. I think that most of the people here seem to agree somewhat in principle, but not in the timing. And so if we table it, then Rob, you can do some more research. We can answer some of these other questions and bring it back off the table.
From
later.
what I gathered out of that meeting, it was money driven. Their decisions right now are driven by cost. And until you change that philosophy and thought process to they're starting to think about the health of the lagoon, then like you said, it may be premature.
And that's going to be driven by the proper information, which means it has to be backed up by good science, not politically motivated, but accurate truth. And then the proper presentation. Have faith in the American public. They'll do the right thing when they're brought the proper information.
Right.
Not every one of them, but the vast majority.
Mr. Stradley?
And comment about you, too, with the impact fees, or your statement was if it's for the good of the people, that's where I've seen in my research where they've waived impact fees. Only in those occasions where they felt that it was for the good of whatever reason, whether it was a river they were discharging into or something like that, that is when they've done these programs.
Well, no, if you table it, make a motion to table it, then, and that passes, then we'll.
What you would do is if you would withdraw your motion and if you agree to it since you second it, and then you can just make the recommendation to table it. And then that will take care of it.
I'll withdraw my second.
Well, I'll withdraw the motion before you withdraw the second. All right. So then I'll make a recommendation that we table the motion. Okay. But we did have some public comment from Mr. Mutcher on this motion that has been withdrawn. So, Rob, thank you
That's
very
fine.
much.
Mark Mutcher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I have 2 perfectly good septic tanks with a new drain field. When I first got up to speak a half an hour ago, I was going to speak to support the chairman's motion, and I'll go into that in a minute. But then Chuck mentioned about the staff time that goes into these things, and it just reminded me of the time that the county wanted to put water out in Vero Lake Estates, and Vero Lake Estates did a mob rule, red shirt type appearance at the county commission meeting, and they said, we got all the water we need. We don't want any water. Again, it was a money issue. And I remember Terry Pinto saying, well, I've spent $500,000 in engineering costs on this project. So, I'd ask you all and the staff to, and the public to keep that in mind so that never happens again. With respect to the motion, as I said, I wanted to support it, but for a different reason. I'm not sure, and nobody else is either, whether these 10 units or in fact, any of the units, we don't know where the point sources of this pollution is. But with respect to the impact fees, it's my understanding, and I'm just amateur at this, and I would like to hear someone definitively say it, preferably more than one lawyer, but that impact fees have to be spent on future expansion caused by the impact of the current or future improvements. So, and going back and paying the bond fees forward is probably not allowed under impact fee rulings. As a matter of fact, there are several counties that are being sued by different state agencies in Florida and elsewhere, where they have to give back their impact fees because they were improperly charged. And maybe you'll get yours back, Toby. I don't know. So, I would like to see the impact fees in this case because there will be the costs will all be borne by the project costs and not by and not place a burden on the plant and infrastructure. I have been told, and I don't know the numbers, but we have plenty of capacity. I don't know to what percentage capacity we have or any details, but I've been told we have plenty of capacity. That may be right or wrong. But with that in mind, we wouldn't have an impact on the future system. There's no future plans for expansion that I'm aware of. Further, we're the motion to go forward. I don't think Jane could second it because she's an alternate today.
She's actually, we're short members, so she's a voting
There's
member.
5 of you here.
Oh.
There's 6 members
There's 6
on this board and 2 alternates.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so the alternate can cover the shortest position. That's
Mark, for clarification, I asked before I seconded.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, never mind. So it was a good motion. And again, I hope it would go forward for different reason. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to take a brief 5-minute recess and then continue our meeting. Thank you.